good folk, but in any case, lots of excellent memories. So we remember Johnny. Very, very important to that ministry for so many years. Thank you very much.
Good day. My name is Victor Dick, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the early years of John being a teacher. I'm reaching retirement these days, and I find myself surrounded by a lot of young people at work, almost multitudes, and when we're having lunch together or when we're at work, I often find myself accidentally reminiscing. And I'm finding I'm reminiscing more and more these last few years. And very often the topic of blessings comes up. And I think a lot of my co-workers never thought of blessings, even tremendous blessings, or that blessings can come after other blessings. And so today, thinking of Johnny and also Bertha and the family, I'm looking back to those years, 1964, as a grade 7er, and thinking of those days when Johnny was my teacher. And it was possible that that may have been his first year. I'm not certain. It was. And so I recollect the year before, grade 6, and how tumultuous that was. We were on the verge of becoming teenagers, and everything that brings to a classroom. And in grade 6, we had a teacher that was a strapper. He knew how to take care of business. And then when grade 7 arrived, of course, we never think ahead, we never think back, but here we were in grade 7, and here is someone new by the last name Mr. Klassen. What would that bring? And of course, we were all new to that grade. We had no idea what was going to happen. But we found in time that we had a teacher who was a gentleman rather than a gang member. And despite the fact that in grade 7 there was even more tumult than in grade 6, that Johnny was able to take all of this in good stride and remain calm and carry us through that grade. And so he was a tremendous blessing to us, especially to some. And as a blessing upon a blessing, during that year, we were introduced to music. And I had a small taste of music before that, and Johnny and Bertha both formed a tiny little band. I don't know if there was much of a band program in those years in school, but they had a little morsel of a band that we were invited to join. I think there were only 8 of us in it. And those blessings go a long way. So our children are here today, and they have been beneficiaries of that encouragement and that delight that they showed, that generosity, and that gentleness and patience. Thank you.
Well, anyone else want to come up? Still have some time. Okay. So on one of our trips to Germany, we happened to be at the MCC headquarters. Big building, 3 stories, staff of 25 people. Hugo Jans was there at the time. We had supper with a large crowd, and the staff were complaining about the computers, brand new computer system for the entire operation that was only working at 20%. The experts from the company had been back 3 times, they couldn't get it running. Johnny's ears were twitching when he heard this story. He says, well, after supper, he says, maybe I could have a look at it. So they turned around like, who's this guy? And he said, well, I'd like to hear what your problem is. Well, 3.5 hours later, those computers were working at 100%. And so I asked Johnny, not being a computer expert myself, what did you do? He says, I tricked the computer into solving itself. I said, I'm sure you did. So to say that this guy was bright is perhaps an understatement. I also had the joy of singing in a glee club at Teachers College with Johnny. He was a student, just married, and he arranged a lot of the music for the choir, and the choir director, as you can imagine, really liked him, because he did a lot of his work for him. So a couple of years later, the choir director, being a close friend of my older brother's, had a conversation about Johnny with me. He said, you know, you guys all wrote those entrance exams. I don't know if they were IQ tests, but they lasted for 2 days. You know, had math skills, LA skills, whatever they were. He said, well, JCKlassen had the highest mark. I said, well, I'm not surprised. No, he says, not the highest mark of the school, the highest mark, highest aggregate mark in the school's history. And I said, oh, well, I said, I'm still not surprised. No. But that was Johnny, but he was very humble about that. He was a truly humble person. Anyone else want to come? If not, I would encourage you to stick around, get your coffee cups refilled, and continue the conversation and stories around the table. Sorry, one more. Oh, say. Bertha wants to say something, and of course I will yield the microphone.
I have a little paper. That means I won't go more than 2 minutes.
You get an extension.
And to correct my niece's opinions of me, I was a school teacher too. They didn't know that. They thought I was just a wife. I would like to thank Karen and Jim, and Donna and Andy for the multitude of work they did to get this day going. I've never had the experience before of sitting back and watching my children work. It's just I wanted to correct Dave Lowen's comments, but I can't find the right word. Has that happened to you? It's something to do with passports. There's a different word. Something you need before you make that final visa. That's the word. Remember? And he told the rest of the story quite correctly. Like Bill or Mr. Ham said that was an angel. There is no such a thing as a Russian consul. We just accepted what he came in. He said, "You have trouble? Yeah, we don't have visas." So we stood there and waited. And 10 minutes later, he brought them in. We didn't even look at them. We passed them on to the fellow. He put it in his, stamped them, put it down there, and we never heard of them again. Talk about angels, they know how to work. So I've corrected the one mistake. I was a school teacher, girls. Yeah. I have to give a lot of thanks to Ken Stace, the pastor of this church, to Jane Welk, who is from McIver. She's there's a long title, but she's a care person, a chaplain. I really enjoy working with her, or listening to her. I have to give credit to Henry Waddell for his excellent job of leading German and English singing and string quartets and people who don't know German. Thank you, Henry. And way back, I have to also thank the technicians at Gospel Light Hour. Sometimes I get, or quite often, I get very flowery compliments on how I play the piano. And I take them with a grain of salt because I learned through the radio programs what to do with the piano. It's totally different than playing in a church congregation. For instance, JCKlassen, Lottie's husband, told me you don't hang on to the pedal, the damper pedal at the end of a piece when you're recording for radio. Did you know that? I didn't till then. What happens? The sound waves, maybe Jake can explain it, the sound waves continue blowing, and blowing, that's the wrong word. Anyway, that's why you don't put your foot on the pedal. Waving, that's the word. Very close. Thank you, Jake. So that's one thing I learned. And Jake Entz, you remember Jake Entz was the technician before, well, way back in the dark ages, let's say. And he helped me out of a real jam. I was teaching school, and on Saturdays my husband and I would listen to the CFAM when we'd sleep in the morning, and we'd wake up around 9 o'clock, which was really early for us as school teachers. Anyway, on all these programs, they stimulated me into bringing my class there. Her habit was to bring a class into the studio. She probably picked them up somewhere in the highways and byways of Altona, and they would do a spontaneous program on the radio on all these, whatever, it was called a party, something like that. When my principal heard that I was planning to take kids out of Winnipeg for 70 miles to Altona, he says, "You can't do that." And we had practiced for weeks, you know, all the school teachers will know, until you're sick and tired of a piece, but we had rehearsed a little guy who would be the announcer, and here we had to cancel the whole thing. Jake Entz comes to the rescue. I don't know if his bosses knew that one day when he decided to come and record us, that he was taking the stuff, the recorders, what's the equipment, thank you, Donna, the equipment out of the studio and going to a school in the sort of poorer area of town. This was King Edward School, Arlington and Selkirk. And we just simply recorded our program, one take. Those children just rose to the occasion. And my grandchildren, they hear one of these pieces. Poor old Jonathan Byng went out in his carriage to visit the king, and everyone pointed and said, "Look at that, Jonathan Byng has forgotten his hat," and so on. I have Jake Entz from Gospel Light Hour to thank for that. And Steve Harder, he was also another technician. Learned some things from him that when you're putting away cords, or even hoses when you're watering the garden, if you take them double and wrap them, roll them up, they never tangle. He would show that to me every time he was cleaning up after a recording. How nicely he wrapped up or rolled up the what's the word? Wires? Cables, thank you. You can tell I'm past 80, I'm forgetting important words. But the most important person I have to thank, or the being, is God. That he put JCKlassen in my way. I met him first in grade 12. I was a poor little girl from Saskatchewan, homesick like crazy. And there was Johnny with his blonde hair and bright red corduroy jacket. And he didn't give me another look. So when he went to college, and I was at college, I had to teach the students that didn't have a teacher. Who was on my list? Johnny. All I remember from those lessons, I think he managed grade 4. All I remember is that when Monday came and he came there, I could see he hadn't shaven. So I think I've thanked everybody except my sister Mary. I wonder how many of you know my sister Aunt Mary Pauls. She's taught many of you in Sunday school. She's now in the nursing home in Don, but thank you, Donna. What will I do without you? Okay. She taught me many, many things. The first one was to hang up my clothes. I was a teenager and she was 4 years older, responsible for tidying up. We had just got electricity on the farm, and every bedroom you could see the cords they were not hidden. I came into the room one day and there were all my clothes hanging that I had decorated the floor with. She had hung them all up on that floor. Now that's a loving lesson from an older sister, right? She also said to us, "You people take far too much music in your family and you don't do enough exercise." Could be. You should go swimming. She said she just finished courses at the YMCA. So I followed her advice. We all went. I think all of our kids learned to swim, and Johnny knew how to swim, so he didn't have to go every week. But we had, when I went to special swimming lesson, there was a teacher who we all wanted to emulate. She had a figure like you could die for. And she was tall, and she was funny, and everything she said, we took, not with a grain of salt, we took it as gospel truth. So she taught us how to eat, but she also taught us how to swim. I have never stopped swimming since, neither have I stopped eating. So as you could see, we had a wonderful life together, John and I. Some things you may not have known before, and I had the great pleasure in McIver Church of meeting my former grade 6 classmate, Annabelle. Would you stand up, please? Please, put your hands together for Annabelle Martins. Guess how often Main Center gets into the conversation when we're out for a coffee. Thank you so much. I could thank a whole lot more people, but I think some of you have deadlines to meet. I'm really thrilled that you're all here. There's my friend Augusta Schrader, who is in the same, not predicament, but in the same situation there again. She is my friend from grade 12. And every time we have a reunion for MBCI, who did they ask? Gussie and Bertha. We were on the 75th committee together, and with more of our friends, we were on the 50th committee together, and on the 60th we were together. And I've heard that they give the 65th reunion of a class free. Is that correct, Andrew? Good. And one more thing that Dave thought he should have, I thought he should have mentioned. My husband was one of the few people that followed in Dave's shoes. Literally. My husband travels very light. He had one pair of shoes when we got robbed in Russia. We still had a few weeks till we got home. So who lent him his shoes? Dave Bowen. Thank you very much for coming, all my good friends. Thank you.
Thank you all. Just continue conversation around the table as long as you like. Thank you for coming.